Hey everybody, welcome back to a new episode of Pass the Mic, where we like to highlight international Indigenous artists. Today I am joined by
Veronica Blackhawk from Tinge.
hello, Veronica. How are you doing?
I'm very well. I'm sitting in a Starbucks right now, so don't mind the background noise. A little bit of ambiance.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's a beautiful day. Autumn is one of my favorite times of year, and it's always a lovely view.
I would love to have autumn weather. Unfortunately, it's rainy season and it's just sweltering hot all that. Like I have a massive fan right behind me trying to keep me cool, which is it's also horrible when you're like recording and you're just like, yeah, so but at least it's cooler. It's the nighttime, not as bad. So you are songwriter and vocalist from a band called Tinge. Do you want to share a little bit more about your work with the band?
Yeah, so Tinge is a project that started realistically, it's me as a songwriter. I've been singing and writing since I was 8 years old. Tinge is what formed in 2018 after I attended the Winnipeg Folk Fest Young Performers program. And so that's just like an incubator that brings young artists into our local folk festival and provides mentorship and that kind of thing. And so from that point on, I wanted to kind of use an umbrella term for my projects that wasn't my name, because I wanted to separate the art from the artist and kind of have it as a thing that other people can project feelings onto. And that's kind of where like the name Tinge comes from, because it's a little, when you hear the word tinge, you think of a little bit of everything, right? Yeah. And so I started releasing, we did our first ever release in March of 2023. Like I'd mentioned, I've been writing songs forever, so a lot of those songs were written like up to 10 years prior and were just kind of saved as our debut. I wanted to share songs that showcased just how like the various styles of genre that we kind of go through, along with deeper stories that showcase my background, which pertains to a lot of my identity behind being a young Indigenous person based in Winnipeg. A lot of the EP, you hear common themes of like working and trying to deal with my identity, or living and healing through intergenerational trauma. And it's something that I feel like over the past recent years has been a lot more common and an acceptable conversation to have in Canada, based on the findings and the different things that people have been sharing from their experiences with dealing with the residential schools, which is something that was put in place by colonizers when society kind of came in from when Canada was colonized by Brits. And yeah, I don't have to get too into that background. I'm sure everybody's pretty aware of that, but yeah, the music itself, it's been a really beautiful journey. I held back for a really long time, and I feel like part of that has to do with my identity as an Indigenous woman playing rock music, because out here it's definitely dominated by cis white males. And so finding a place and a scene where I felt safe and comfortable to share the content that I have took me a lot of, and I had to be really careful about who I worked with and who I brought into that space. So eventually I did settle on producer Adam Fear with House of Wonders. He is absolutely wonderful to work with. Right off the bat, I think my first conversation with him was just supposed to be like a 30-minute consult, and I think we ended up talking for an hour just about music and politics, and kind of getting into a lot of those narratives, which was a green flag right off the bat.
Yeah, that's always great when you can work with people that you can feel vulnerable to talk about these themes that are also reflected in your work. When you already have that, like, you're really not on the same page, like ethically, value-wise, politically, you're like, hey, okay, this might not work out. So that's really amazing that you're able to find that.
Yeah, his whole goal, his studio is being able to provide artists with affordable recording services. And like for the quality, I did some looking around, and like for the price and the quality, it was just one of the best places to go. And like again, that is something I am very passionate about, as well as trying to provide creatives with an upper hand in getting their art shared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so was Tinge, I don't know if you actually touched on it, is Tinge your first project that you worked on, or have you worked on other projects in the past? Or is this like the first one where you've really been able to like express yourself and find the balance as an artist and really come into your own voice as an artist?
I feel like it's definitely one of the most successful projects that I've pushed myself forward in. I have been a part of another project. They're another wonderful singer-songwriter based out of Winnipeg. Their name is Blue McLeod. They have a band called Grotoko, in which they do all sorts of different multi-instrumental production and recordings. And I I did love playing with them for a while, but eventually I knew I had to kind of take some time to build something of my own.
Mm-hmm.
And it eventually that's where Tinge came.
All right, awesome. So you had was it the EP that came out, and was it in March 2023?
Yes.
All right. This is Big Sigh? No.
Big Deep Sigh.
Big Deep Sigh. Sorry. Would you like to share a little bit more about the process of the EP now that it's out?
Sure. Yeah. The three songs, the 5 songs that we started off with. Like I mentioned, I felt like they were some of the most strongest instrumentally and emotionally impactful. In the process of recording that, I brought in 2 instrumentalists that I was friends with in high school. And it was actually like maybe 9 years before even getting together again. And it was really nice to kind of find that chemistry with, people that I knew as kids, and to come into the studio. None of us had ever played together before the recording. Like we did dabble in high school, but I don't think the 3 of us ever played as a full band. So it was our very first time in the studio getting to know the songs. So everything you're hearing is just us kind of fumbling around and getting it together from that point. I feel like live we have gotten a lot stronger, and it was a goal of mine to minimize the extra production things. Like I didn't want to add harmonies because I wouldn't be able to replicate that on stage. And so I wanted to make sure like we sounded a lot like we do when we play live, and that is a comment that we get pretty often, which is very validating.
Yeah, that's always great when the band actually sounds like what they sound like in studio as it is on stage, because then it's just like, is it that bad really? That's great. So yeah, did I hear that right? Was it, so would you say like you really prefer performing live than actually doing studio recordings? You would identify more as like a live music artist, or?
I'm still exploring that, and that's the very, very fun part about stepping into your own artistic career. Like I'd mentioned before, I had always wanted to have that live sound, and I kind of like preferred the lower quality recordings for a lot of my favorite demos because of the raw feeling it brought. The thing is, though, as I step more into my journey as a producer, I'm learning so much more about textures and sounds and ways to convey emotion that aren't just lyrics, that aren't as emotionally taxing and mentally taxing. And that's the beauty of sound work, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've done
Mhm.
I've done a little bit of soundtrack in the past as well, and that's something I really want to keep exploring in the future too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really building a sound, like a very, very unique sound on top of like adding that little element on top of the live music. That's great.
Yes.
So with your music, who would you say like would be most inspirational to you? Like who are your interests in terms of like really honing into your own sound? Who would you say is really inspirational for you?
The first person I always mention, my friends are probably tired of me talking about it, but it's Julian Baker from Boy Genius.
Mhm.
That whole crew, her, Phoebe Bridgers. I don't sound very similar like in the music itself, but when it comes to the emotions and
Mm,
the bravery and honesty in sharing the harder stories, I feel
mhm,
like that is something that has inspired me to actually go forward and not feel bad about having these bad feelings, you know.
mhm.
A lot of bands as well, a lot of female fronted emo indie bands, I really look up to. I actually curate a playlist of my own called Emo Intersectional, where
Okay.
I try to highlight lesser known women and BIPOC artists that play indie rock, because I just find that a lot of their music and content is more relatable to me than
Mhm.
the wider narrative. And it's just a really good way to kind of expand and learn from other people.
Yeah, that's great. You're gonna have to also share that link for the playlist for those that want to
Absolutely.
dig and listen to that sound and get into it. That's awesome. Yeah, so new EP's been out. What's the next step for Tinge or for Veronica for the sound? What are we looking at in the future?
So we'll be stepping into production again, starting in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a new percussionist that I'm really excited about working with. He actually does all sorts of auxiliary percussion, so not just drums, but like marimba and just all sorts of different fun percussion textures that I'm hoping to play with on
Mm-hmm.
the new EP, because we actually will be able to replicate that live.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely want to step more into like harmonies and just adding a lot of those little bits and textures that I was scared of adding before because I was afraid of the live act.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm definitely gonna embrace it moving forward.
That's great. Can't wait to see what you come up with. So do you have like a release date coming up soon, or you're still working on like moving with the flow of the new EP?
We're hoping to have it out by end of spring for
Mm,
next year,
okay,
around
next
there,
year.
so that we can get into playing shows and festivals again.
All right, that's great. And you spoke earlier about like having trouble finding like a safe space for you to express yourself with your own identity within the space of let's say alternative kind of rock music in Canada. How would you say the scene, have you seen the scene change since you've really gotten into it as a performer, or is it pretty much the same, or like
I feel like the more we have these conversations, the more I make it known that there are barriers. It's harder for people to ignore, and it becomes
mm,
more of a conversation topic and less of a taboo. I have a lot, like I've been able to, since stepping into the scene, I've networked a lot more with other queer and BIPOC artists that are also feeling the same way. So we have been talking about getting together and promoting more shows and providing more opportunities for different BIPOC artists. I'm also a part of the Good and Plenty Producers Club, which has been growing and been definitely one of those factors that has been benefiting the scene in so many different ways.
That's great. Well, if this festival happens with all of you getting together, make sure you let us know. We can
Absolutely.
definitely come and show out in numbers, and definitely would love to see that happen.
It would be amazing.
Yes, yes, I think it would. These larger music festivals that happen in your region, do you see that there's space being created for more alternative, experimental, or rock sounds in terms of when they handle Indigenous artists? Is it more just like really focusing on Indigenous traditional music, or how do you see it now? Do you see that they're being a bit more flexible with the type of artists that they're booking, or just, I see that you're trying to carve a space specifically with your sound and your community, but I'm curious to know about what that looks like for like the larger music scene in general in your region.
Okay. I love this question because it is something that is actually very prevalent in the Indigenous music scene. Is Indigenous musicians are often pigeonholed and kind of categorized under one thing. Traditional powwow singers, they're categorized as Indigenous musicians, whereas I play indie rock music. I'm categorized as an Indigenous musician. It is a weird conversation topic because we as individuals, everybody's so different. No
Totally.
Indigenous musician is the same. There, I feel like in terms of the spaces being provided at different festivals, it's coherent with how many just Indigenous musicians are willing and able to get out there in general. I don't feel like stylistically it's limited in that sense, whereas the way we are categorized, like in the Grammys per se, the conversation in a wider degree is still definitely a work in progress, but as I mentioned, it is slowly but surely happening, just as we are empowering each other and getting out there and showing that we don't just do powwow music.
Yeah, that there's different levels and different inspirations and interests, and like anybody can make any sound. Like I always like to say, where's your will to be weird? Just to say like not the regular, not the mainstream. Are we being allowed to create our weird art, our weird music,
Exactly.
without being pigeonholed into like, if you're not doing this traditionally, following XYZ, this is you can't do it. And it's just like, yeah, but everyone else can do it, so it's just like letting people create the art that they want to create and share the voice that they want to share and share their own story, which I think is extremely important. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So we're at the part of the show where we would like to pass the mic, and I know that you have some people lined up. So who do you think would benefit for being able to share their music on this platform? Who do you think people should be listening to that they're not listening to, that you need people to get on, other than your amazing playlist?
Okay. Well, my favorite band of all time right now is Love Language. They are fronted by another Anishinaabe rock star from Montreal. Their music is just out of this world. Like, it's post rock, it's punk, it's fun, it's indie. And she herself is just a beautiful person and also does a lot of work for Indigenous artists within the arts communities. Another person that I'm going to recommend, I just finished working with him out in BC as well. His name is Milan Andre Boronel. We actually had a conversation about this while we were out there because he creates some of the coolest atmospheric folk rock stuff that I've found so far. And it's a really big breath of fresh air, but he's also kind of found himself pigeonholed and kind of dealing with the same barriers and finding these spaces. And so I feel like he's definitely a good candidate to have either on the show or just to listen to in general. But yeah, we also work together for Inuijanan, which is a service that brings music production and music videos to young Indigenous communities across Canada. And one last person I wanted to bring up as well, a local friend. This band isn't on the same label, but he is in bands. He's in many bands, and one of those bands is our sister label, is on our label. Sorry. His band is called Fold Paper, and they also make some of the wildest, most unique post-rock kind of stuff ever. They're also local gems that I think need some more recognition.
All right, cool. I can't wait for you to send those links so we can share it with everybody on the video, and for me to also check that out with your playlist, and also to share more links for Tinge as well as your EP with all of the other viewers. So
absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. Is there any like final words you want to leave us with before we end off with the show?
I just want to thank you again for creating this space and having me. I love having these conversations. It's what makes me it's what gives me purpose and what gives me a drive to keep going forward and keep having the creative energy, even though it can be daunting sometimes.
Yeah, we try to make it work. It's always about just keeping it moving and keeping having these conversations, building those bridges, interacting with like community internationally, and just being open to having those conversations for sure, and being open to being available for this conversation in a Starbucks. We're doing it. It's happening.
Cheers. I'll drink to that.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here. And we'll see you all next episode. Bye, everybody.